Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday the 14th of May, and I'm going to hand over to Amy to do the housekeeping for me. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. Can I remind everybody present that this hybrid meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and that this recording is archived for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak this evening, can they please raise their hand in person if sat in the chamber, or use the remote raise hand function located in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. This will put you in the speaker queue accordingly, and when subsequently invited to address by the chair, please press your activation button in the bottom centre of your screen. Please be patient and be aware that there may be a small time lag and that you do not need to press the button again. The response of the system is not instant. If the button or desk microphone changes to red, then it has responded. If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to address by the chair, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the remote chat function. When invited to address by the chair, Councillor Janice Charles, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of myself or the Democratic Services Officer, Gareth Davis, as soon as possible. Once you have participated, please remember to turn your activation button off, as not to delay any other participants from coming onto screen and to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of myself or the Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard this evening when they are addressing the committee, then please could they let myself or the chairman know. If a remote committee member has a prejudicial interest and is therefore required to withdraw from the meeting this evening, the Democratic Services Officer will place the participant in the virtual waiting room until such time that the interested item has concluded. Please do not close your browser window whilst in the waiting room, as the Democratic Services Officer will bring you back into the meeting automatically when appropriate. For members attending the meeting in person today, they will be asked to leave the chamber for the duration of the interested item and will be invited back into the room as appropriate. If the chair calls for an electronic vote this evening, then advice on how to participate will be given accordingly to committee members with voting rights at that time. Thank you, Chair. That concludes the housekeeping.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you very much. Before we move on to part one, agenda item 1, I'd just like to thank Emma Goodjohn and also my colleague. Only 2 people, Emma Goodjohn and also to Rob Fisher for their participation last year in this committee, and to sincerely thank them very much. And on that note, I would like to welcome Councillor Godfrey and also Councillor Sue Lloyd-Selby. Welcome back, Sue, and nice to see you, Russell, which takes us on to appointment of the Vice Chair. Do we have any nominations, please? Ian?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Thomas.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Okay, well, I'll second you then. Thank you very much. If you'd like to take your seat beside me.
Can I just check if there's any more nominations, Chair?
I couldn't see any. Nobody'd put their hand up. Are there any more nominations? No. Thank you. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. I have one, Councillor Christine Cave. Yeah, Councillor Collins. Yeah. Thank you. Amy, do you have any?
None via myself, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, can't see any. Thank you. Agenda item 4 is to receive the declarations of interest and the nature of such interests, including whipping declarations.
Just do the previous minutes, please, Chair.
Oh, gosh, most important. Yeah, sorry. Agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of April, 2024. Would you like me to do this page by page, or would you like to move the minutes? Thank you. Thank you. Back to agenda item 4, which is to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests, including whipping declarations under the Council's Code of Conduct. Do we have any? Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby, thank you.
Yes, before I declare, could I just ask that colleagues who are in the chamber use their mics when they're speaking, because we haven't been able to hear what's said from within the chamber. Thank you. Declaration of interest in relation to agenda items 5 and 6. I've been appointed as an independent member of Cardiff and Vale University Health Board. It's a personal, not a prejudicial interest, and so I'll stay in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd-Selby. Which takes us on to agenda item 5, which is the report of the Director of Social Services, Lance Carver, on performance evaluation inspection of Vale of Glamorgan Social Services update. We had this a year ago, and we asked for it to be brought back to us for a 12-month update for approval. Lance, would you like to speak on it first?
Yes, please, Chair. I think just by way of introduction, the areas of improvement that this report concentrates on were identified in a context of many strengths, which aren't part of the report that you see today, but I thought it was helpful that I remind committee members of the extensive strengths that were identified during that report. In terms of these actions, they also sit in a context of a much larger set of actions, a broader set of actions, delivering on our wider reshaping services agenda. And that includes other actions that you will have seen, such as the service plan actions, priorities set out in the Director's report, the Budget Programme Board actions, specific workforce actions, as well as our contribution to the Council's annual delivery plan. And these we manage all through one process. So that includes the CIW actions. We manage that through our reshaping services programme. The Care Inspectorate Wales format in terms of how they identified the strengths and the areas for improvement were essentially in four main sections. Excuse me. People, voice and control being one, prevention being the second, well-being being the third, and fourthly, partnerships. They also separate them out into adults and children, and you'll see that the first set of actions relate to adults and the second to children. Your committee members will be aware that our directorate is not just made up of adults and children's services, it's also made up of resource management and safeguarding. In terms of the approach to the inspection, that isn't how CIW look at things, so you will see that the contribution from resource management and safeguarding is spread across the action plan. The report shows progress by each quarter, and I'm aware that makes it a little bit clunky, but I did want to be really open with committee and show them the work that had happened since January 23, and in some cases the rapid progress that was made, whereas in others the progress has been longer to achieve. But I wanted you to be able to see exactly when those things had happened. Out of 24 areas for improvement, 20 are complete. The remaining 4 continue, and I'm sure you will probably have a look at those in a bit more detail in a minute, but in some cases the very nature of the area for improvement makes it an area which is very difficult to consider something as being absolutely finished. So I would hope you would bear that in mind when you consider them. I wasn't intending to go through them. I think my heads of service colleagues and myself should be able to provide any updates or any requests for further information that you may have as a result of any of the 24. So I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. I have spoken to Lance. I recognise what you're saying, that there's a lot of good work. One of the questions that I asked him was about the meeting with the Welsh Government, which was cancelled in the first quarter of the year. However, Lance did explain to me that this was due to sickness of a member of staff. So there's nothing you can do about that. But because we're now into June, I don't think the meeting's been rearranged yet. And I did have concerns mostly about the it's section 8 of the report, demand for preventative services, and I'm really concentrating on the early parenting service in the Vale. So I did email and I did copy you in, Chair, the things that I was asking about later this afternoon was that, yes, the waiting list has gone up, but one of my questions was, is this because of a change in the criteria? For example, if you had a vulnerability score of 20 to access a service and you lower the score to 15, then you're going to get more. So is there a reason for it, or is there a bigger area? Or have we suddenly got more families in need? I don't know what the answer is. So I was asking that question. Also, you know, does it depend on like what areas you're servicing? So you're travelling in between, because if it's half an hour to get from one family to another, and you do that 3 times a day, you know. I was concerned, and I have expressed this, about the emphasis, as I saw in the report, to move from group parenting to one-to-one parenting. And I'm using my experience of 50 years in nursing and 25 of those working in the community. If you say to a parent, do you want a one-to-one or a group? They will probably ask for a one-to-one. But we're not in the situation where we've got the resources. And I also think that even if people are reluctant to go for a group, and I do recognise that certain families it will not be relevant because they may have information or things they can't share in a group, and that would be totally inappropriate. But families that go to groups often make connections with the people in the group. So they're learning from each other and they're making, so there's more than just the parenting, there's the social aspect. And what concerned me was the way this was written. If I was out on the beat, you know, and I thought, what's the council's policy? And I looked at this, I would say, oh, the council's policy is one-to-one, and I don't think we should be going down that road. But that's my view of it. And as I said, not entirely without the experience of working in this environment. So I'm concerned about the online parenting tool. Very good. But what happens if you don't have a computer? What happens if you're not Wi-Fi connected? What happens to those parents who aren't computer literate? How are they going to access it? Is there going to be hard copies of material, or is there a disc they can put in? I don't know. I don't know enough. So I think I'm also concerned about the delay in recruitment, and I wondered, was there a reason for that? In other words, you send an advert in and then it takes ages to be approved before it can go out. But these are frontline services to vulnerable people in the Vale. So I think that was all that I mentioned, isn't it?
You made very good points. Thank you very much. Lance, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, I will do. I'll also ask my colleague Rachel Evans to come in on some of the more specific items in relation to the children's parenting part of it. I think the first one was about continuing a healthcare meeting that we were trying to organise with Welsh Government. And I understand that Jason, he is here, but I don't want to bring him in just to say that he has contacted them to ask them to arrange a further meeting. So I think we have done that already. It was sickness of a Welsh Government colleague, not one of our own staff. But I accept that they will only have limited staff available who'll be able to follow up that piece of work. So we're obviously we're delayed momentarily because of that. I think in terms of some of the other issues, I'm sure Rachel will be able to talk about some of the changes in demand and some of the advantages and disadvantages of group work or one-to-one work. So I'll hand over to her if that's okay.
Thank you, Rachel.
Hello, you can see me?
See and hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, committee, and thank you, Councillor Cope. I'm grateful for the opportunity to provide some clarity for you and hopefully some reassurance. There's no change in eligibility criteria. The increase in referrals is simply down to an increase in demand. So we are receiving a large number of calls to our Families First advice line, which is the entry point into our Families First services. And those calls are requesting parenting support. Therefore, those calls, that need is referred to the Vale Parenting Service, and that is prompting a need for us to rethink our model and look at the sustainability of that model. So the activity that we've shared with you, Councillor Cope, is specifically in order to make sure that we can support the needs of our community in relation to parenting support. So no change in eligibility criteria, just increases in demand. In terms of recruitment, there's no delay in recruitment, so there would be nothing that would have held back a request to advertise the post. We did have, and I'm not intending to go into this in detail because it's not appropriate in committee, but we did have some sickness issues to resolve, and we needed to do that before posts were available to advertise. We've got the usual recruitment process in terms of checks and references. We've made some good appointments, but those people have to give notice to their current employers, and that causes a lead-in time in terms of them starting in post. So no delays, no hold-up, just the usual process, and a need to resolve some sickness issues in the team. Shall I keep going?
Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with where you've got to up to now. Thank you for that reassurance.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll keep going.
Yeah.
In terms of the Padlet, that is a really positive development, and thank you, Councillor Cope, for acknowledging that. Just to provide some reassurance to you, the move to the Padlet is a national drive in order to increase the availability and accessibility of parenting resources to everybody who needs it. What other patterns and trends are telling us is increasingly parents, all of us actually, are moving to digital means to access information and have digital preferences in terms of doing that. You don't need a laptop. You can access the materials through your phone. The largest majority of people have phones and are able to do that and are comfortable in that space. But if somebody isn't comfortable, doesn't wish to use it on their phone, doesn't have a phone, there are hard copies of that material, or will be hard copies of that material available. So trying all the time to make sure we cover every eventuality so that the accessibility is at the forefront of our delivery. I think the final one then is in relation to group work. And again, we're making sure that we're connected nationally in terms of what's happening. And there is a national move away from groups, again, because of patterns and trends in terms of attendance and take-up of those experiences. So it's not that groups haven't been available. It's not that people haven't been encouraged to attend groups. It's that what we're finding is that people aren't turning up for that opportunity. We do provide creche facilities, but in addition to the creche facilities not being utilised, the space within the group isn't being utilised. And what that means is that we're investing resources in a delivery model that isn't being taken up. So there's a concern to move to a model that is much more what is wanted locally and by our communities. That said, there are local authority areas that are moving away from group delivery entirely to a digital-only model. That is not our intention. And positively, we do have, just to share with you, 2 groups that are taking place currently, one within Llantwit Major and one within Pencoitra, where there are 30 parents in each of those groups recruited by the school. So again, where there's a need for groups and a relevance to groups and a take-up in relation to groups, we will have the ability to be able to mobilise that delivery arm as necessary. So primarily a move away from groups to individual one-to-one work on the basis of our experiences, both locally and across Wales, but not an intention to move wholesale to a non-group work option. And we do have groups working very successfully, as I've said, within our local communities, aligned to our schools, which is positive.
Thank you, Rachel. Marianne, are you okay with the answers there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yes, I mean, I just don't want the groups to be lost, or the opportunity for groups, because I just know from experience, and sometimes they don't work at first, and you have to keep, say you had a group on a Monday, and the first 3 Mondays there's only 2 or 3 people, but sometimes they will say, oh, we went and it was good, and then it will increase. I just think that parents get a lot of peer support from each other in those situations, so I wouldn't like to see it lost. And so the only thing I would ask is to look at your papers just to get the emphasis right, because I read it, so if it's the groups are there, but they won't be in every situation, then that would cover it, wouldn't it?
Yeah. No, absolutely understood, and the opportunity to respond is helpful, hopefully, because it gives a broader perspective of what we're doing. I mean, there is a real issue for us to make sure that we are maximising the use of the resources that we've got in order to serve our communities. So we can't have resources being wasted, can we, on a model that isn't being taken up by communities. And that's why we've needed to move away. And it's not been a quick decision, and it's not been an isolated decision. But also we're maintaining that flexibility to mobilise what you might call ad hoc groups as we need to. So I think I'm feeling confident to say to you, well, I'm certainly feeling confident myself, and I would like to be confident in saying to you that we are making sure that we've got a broad enough model that we can mobilise what we need to when we need to.
Thank you both very much. Good.
One more thing, Chair, but I don't think it's for Rachel. I think it's for you, probably. The Welsh Assembly have reduced funding to this service, to our services. What are we, or the Vale of Glamorgan Council, going to do about that? Are we going to make a protest? I know we won't get anywhere, but that's not the point. To actually say, we're not happy that our social services budget or our Families First budget has been cut because the need is going greater.
Yeah, that's the question that needs to go to Cabinet and to full council, really. I think you should write to them with your point. Yeah. Rachel.
Sorry, I didn't know how to make myself heard or seen. I just want to provide some clarity, if that's helpful. So we have had an additional parenting grant that has been available for the last 2 years. This year, there has been a reduction in that grant. But at the same time, there's been a protection of other grants and an increase in other grants. So I just want us to be careful that there's not a wholesale reduction of grants. There is a grant that's been running for less time, which is the additional parenting grant, which has been reduced, but certainly there's been a protection of Families First and Flying Start really positively. So I just want to make sure if there is representation, that's focused in the right areas.
Yeah, I think that answers your question, Marianne, doesn't it? It does balance out that we're having more in some, and to balance out the less in other areas.
What I was going to ask you, Chair, is that we should actually be able to see that then, because otherwise it's giving me a flawed impression So I'm glad that Rachel's mentioned that, because the last thing we want to go and do is make a fuss about something when we've got it in other ways. But if the figures aren't here, we can't see that.
We can certainly bring a report with the figures, I'm sure. Lance?
I mean, this report isn't a finance report. It's a report to update members about progress towards against the areas that were identified by CIW. Obviously, if we were looking at grants, then there would be a finance report. The committee get regular finance reports. If that was wanted to be included within that, I would suggest that would be a more appropriate mechanism than this one.
Yeah, I agree, and also it's something that could be taken to the working party as well. So thank you. I'm a huge supporter of Flying Start as well, so I'm pleased about that. And can I bring in Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, if I may, which I think are for Lance, and then a couple which I'm sure Rachel will want to pick up. So thank you. I think the way that the information has been presented, particularly in terms of the progress that's been made across quarters, is really helpful, actually, in seeing, that we are able to move forward in some of these key issues and concerns. So my first question, if I may, is in relation to the Advocacy Gateway, which was recommissioned, I understand, this year. I appreciate it's very early days, but we are seeing increased demand. So my question in relation to that is there evidence so far, or are we confident that that service has sufficient capacity to meet that increased demand? Second question is in relation to 1.2. So it's really good to see that all known carers are now offered an assessment of their need. I'd be interested to know what the take-up of that is, particularly because we know that many people who are carers don't necessarily identify themselves as being carers. So I think it would be useful to know what the take-up is, because that might be an indication of how proactive officers are being in terms of offering that assessment. And then my final question in relation to adult services is in terms of the dispute with the local health board about funding, it was obviously a concern to see that resulted in a family having to meet the costs of care themselves while that dispute resolution was addressed. So have there been any other examples of that since that issue was identified? And perhaps if I pause there so Lance can respond to those, and then I think I've just got one question for Rachel, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Lance?
I think it might be most appropriate if I bring my colleague Jason in to answer those, because as head of adult services, it's probably more appropriate for him. But I'll see if he's here. Hope he is.
Are you there, Jason? Not at the moment. Can we have your question for Rachel while we're waiting for Jason to join us? Thank you.
Yes, of course. And if we're not able to get a response to those questions tonight, that's fine. Perhaps that could come as follow-up information. So in relation to children and young people services, it clearly sounds as though recording has been an issue, but I understand that we're going to have a follow-up meeting where we can consider those issues in more detail. So I won't ask anything about that. My question is in relation to the concern that was raised around contact with social workers and members of the public reporting that they found contact difficult and follow-up calls weren't happening in the way that people would have wanted. So the report says that steps have now been taken to improve that situation, which is really good to hear. Are there positive signs that that's working, and how is it monitored?
Thank you, Rachel. You're on mute, I think, Rachel. We can't hear you at the moment.
Apologies. Thank you, Councillor Lloyd-Selby. We were concerned to hear the feedback from service users, parents, carers in receipt of our services, children in receipt of our services, and very much wanted to ensure that we address that. So we have gone right back to basics in terms of ensuring that there's a standard of expectations in terms of how we receive, pass on and respond to messages, in terms of how we make telephone numbers, access points available to families that we're working with. And also within some teams, well, in all teams actually now, introducing a duty facility. So there was always somebody that can be contacted. We haven't resurveyed families in relation to their experience of those, I say changes, but those fundamental things that should be in place. But there aren't, there's not a flurry of representation that indicates that that is an issue that hasn't been addressed. I think we need to acknowledge that communication won't always be perfect. So I'm not saying that this has suddenly resolved any issue in contacting us for good. But we have certainly ensured that there's a much clearer understanding around the expectations in terms of communication. So how people communicate with us, the numbers that we make available to them, the way that they can do that, and our responsiveness when we are contacted. Recognising that a social worker, social care officer, team manager, practitioner manager, whoever, will not always immediately be available when somebody needs to speak to them. But we do need to have some level of response and a commitment to return calls, etc. So there's a set of standards, written standards, that are now embedded across the division.
Thank you, Rachel. Susan Lloyd-Selby. Hello, Councillor Selby. We've lost.
Yeah, apologies. Just one follow-up, if I may. So I can see that in the first quarter, April to June 2023, the CLA and placements team were operating a direct line to their duty officer, and that was a pilot to inform wider rollout. So again, just interested to know what the outcome of that pilot was. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That was positive, and that's what's led to those arrangements being available and embedded into all teams. So there's a daily presence in terms of somebody who will always be available. Bear in mind, there'll be demand into services teams on a daily basis, so that will also involve the ability to go out to respond. In which case there will be a routing, if you like, of the calls to somebody who can answer the phone. Business support are a huge part of our receiving calls, but we don't want to have situations where we just leave calls, expectations for replies with business support. So we've got really clear expectations around follow-up, returning calls, being available to families, but recognising that I won't, if I'm the social worker, I won't always be sat waiting for calls. So we do have to manage some expectations, but that's why we have to have some duty arrangements that add resilience to that structure.
Thank you, Rachel. Jason, are you with us now? He is online, but we can't get hold of him. Are we all right, Sue, to come back to that, or to get Jason to write to you?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this is for approval, and I'm going to make a recommendation because I think it's been a most useful topic for us to look at today. So I would like to make a recommendation that we bring it back in a 12 months time for another review for us to look at. Is everybody happy with that? No seconder?
Yeah.
Thank you.
A progress report.
A progress report, yeah, please. In a year's time. Thank you, Lance. Do you want to come in, Lance?
I'm just conscious 20 of the 24 actions are complete. And so are you wanting a progress report on the outstanding 4, or are you wanting something else?
Yeah.
Yeah, I recognise that a lot of them are complete. A lot of them, though, are complete with review. And it's really where those are going as well that we would need to be included, if that's okay.
Thank you, Lance. So the recommendations are that Scrutiny Committee considers the progress against the identified areas of improvement developed by Care Inspectorate Wales, and congratulations on that as well. Well done. And to ensure that members are informed of the progress as requested by the committee in May 2023. So can I have an approval for that, please? Yep, thank you. Thank you. Which moves us nicely on to agenda item 6. This is our report. I could see there are only 1 or 2 minor changes. Amy?
Thank you very much, Chair. And just if I may, Chair, for the sake of the recording, the previous report you had 2 recommendations. The first, as per the report, to note, and the second, that you have a return update report in 12 months' time.
Yes.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify that because I believe
Yes,
you read the
that's right.
reason for recommendation. Thank you. So in terms of the report that's before members this evening, it is a quarterly rolling report that is the property of the committee, and I compile that for you for your approval, Chair. This is your quarter 4. So it's obviously coming to the end of the previous municipal year and looking forward into the next. You have appendices A and B, which set out the decision recommendation tracking for the committee. The committee is in a good position with that. All of the recommendations are completed and all matters are being picked up within the committee's forward work programme, which brings me on nicely to Appendix D in the report, which is the annual forward work programme for the committee going for the year ahead. Since the publication of the report, Chair, there have been 3 minor changes to the forward work programme. So you have your corporate safeguarding reports annually and biannually. I've had notification that they are coming slightly later to Cabinet, and because they are referred on to you, that means you will receive them a month later, but that is very much still on track for you. So I will amend that slightly before publication on the website. And then the last minor tweak is that in the June on the forward work programme, you have the 5-year joint area plan report, but that is now being consolidated with the report that's also received in January 25. So there's no need for 2 entries on that. They'll be consolidated into 1. So you're not losing any content, Chair. It's just that they're coming at the same time jointly. So I will make those very minor tweaks, and the report today is asking for the committee's permission, once those tweaks are made, to publicise on the public website and to agree the status of the actions in A and B. Appendix C, Chair, you have on this quarter 4 report, which is the Cabinet annual forward work programme. So obviously the Cabinet forward work programme has been studied and taken into account to build your committee's annual forward work programme. So that's why it comes on to just this report. You don't have that on every version. It's just your quarter 4. So if I may, Chair, I'd like to move on to recommendations 4 and 5 that you have in this report. This is a timely recommendations because the annual meeting of the council has taken place. We now know who your membership of this committee is, and therefore we're in a position to confirm memberships of your leisure centre working group and budget working group that are specific for this committee for the year ahead. Councillor Thomas obviously has been re-elected as Vice Chair, so yourself and Councillor Thomas would automatically have membership on both of those working groups. If I can deal with the Leisure Centre working group, all of the members that were previously on the group are still on this committee now, so I'd like to propose that as long as those members are happy to remain, then that working group would continue to operate as is.
That was my recommendation, that we keep it as it is at the moment. It worked very, very well. And so I don't know what you think, Councillor Thomas, but...
Yeah, no, it does work well. And it's not an exclusive group. Other people can come along and rock up to that meeting as well. For those who don't know and haven't been on them, it's basically looking around what's happening at the various leisure centres occasionally through the year, and Dave Nevitt's auspices. And they are informative, they are useful. We do get to see successes and problems that are cropping up in the various leisure centres, and things going on with Legacy Leisure that with whom we do have a good relationship, and they're helpful, useful, and interesting tours. So I'd recommend others who aren't on the group coming along as well to see.
Yeah, the more the merrier. Anybody can come along.
If I may, Chair, just before you may want to bring Councillor Cowp, who's indicating in, obviously Councillor Cave, as the same political group as you, has advised that she's happy to remain on both those groups, and Councillors Norman, Stallard and Lynch-Wilson are connected into the meeting this evening. So I would just ask that if they would like to
Stay on the committee.
yes, if they'd like to stay on, could they indicate either raising a hand or coming on screen? I can see Councillor Norman and Lynch-Wilson are indicating. Can I just get approval from Councillor Stallard, please? And Councillor Stallard.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. So if there's no dissent from the committee, obviously we can move that recommendation that the leisure working group remains the same.
Can I bring in Councillor Russell Godfrey, please?
Hello all. Yeah, I've not managed to connect. Yeah, I'd be interested in being involved in the group as well.
Thank you, Thank you, Councillor Godfrey. The agenda item 5 was the Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee. Can I have an indication, the working group, can I have an indication of those people that would like to stay on that committee? I thought it worked very well.
So if I may, Chair, obviously yourself and Councillor Thomas were members, also Councillor Ball, Councillor Cave and Councillor Norman. Councillor Ball and Councillor Norman are on the line with you. I can see Councillor Norman's raised a hand and Councillor Ball has now to agree to remain. But if I may point out, Chair, Councillor Fisher has obviously left your committee. So you do have a 6th seat that is available to be taken up if any members would like to indicate to take that.
Councillor Russell Godfrey is the first one up, I believe. Councillor Russell Godfrey, would you like to be on that committee? Take over from Councillor Robert Fisher. Councillor Godfrey.
Yeah, happy to go on there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm quite happy to go on there.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. We can hear you, and obviously, just for the sake of the minutes, Chair, obviously these working groups are not subject to political balance, so it is just a case of members who are interested to join. So I will take that recommendation, Chair, if you're happy that we continue with the working group with the established memberships with the addition of Councillor Godfrey.
Yep, thank you very much, Amy.
And that concludes my presentation of the report, Chair. That covers the 5 recommendations for you.
Marianne.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with the nominations. I haven't got a problem. I just wanted to ask, the Leisure Centre Working Group was established in September 23. I don't know when you've met, so I don't think I've been informed in the past. But if I was informed in the future and I could come, that would be great. So thank you. And secondly, would it be possible to just have a little bullet point report sometime of what's been happening for the rest of the committee that aren't on the group?
We have had that, and we'll make sure that you get an invitation to the next one.
Thank you.
Amy?
Yes, just for clarity, Chair, obviously the invitations to the Leisure Centre Working Group visits would have gone exclusively to obviously the working group, which was established, but obviously I can make sure that you're invited into those. Councillor Cowp, now you've expressed an interest in that. And once there is a visit that takes place, it's standard practice then that the next full scrutiny committee meeting, the chair will usually provide an update, and usually Dave Nevitt, who's your leisure officer, will be here to provide that information on that as well.
Yes, the last meeting we had was at Penarth, and it was very, very informative and most enjoyable. The other three recommendations that we have on agenda item 6 is that the status of the actions listed in Appendix A and B to the report be agreed. Now a mover, please.
Can I move the recommendations en bloc?
Thank you. Seconder. Thank you. And recommendation 2. Oh. Recommendation 2.
You're on off, Chair.
Thank you for moving them en bloc. Councillor Thomas. I have no urgent items. I have no part 2 items. So thank you all very much for your attendance this evening. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. And no doubt we will see you soon, especially on May the
11th of June. Chair.
The 11th of June is the next meeting.
No, we've got this extra meeting, Chris Frank's meeting.
Yeah. Amy, do you want to come in about the call-in?
Thank you, Chair. Just to obviously remind members that a call-in has been received for this committee's attention, and an additional special meeting has been arranged on that. So only that item will be considered for that meeting that's coming up. All members of the committee have been informed, and Councillor Franks has also been invited to attend, as well as your cabinet portfolio holder, which is Councillor Eddie Williams. So arrangements are in play for that, and the papers will be available to members shortly.
Thank you all very much. Hope to see you then. If you can make it, we realise it's short notice, so don't despair if you can't. And as I say, thank you all very much. Have a good evening and thank you for your attendance.
Thank you.
Chair.